On this episode of the NHL At the Rink podcast, we've got Mike Zeisberger talking all Mitch Marner, Toronto Maple Leafs, and what happened there. We talk trade deadline fallout, who's the best in the Central Division, and so much more. All of that coming up on this episode of the NHL At the Rink podcast.
NHL At the Rink is presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Welcome into another episode of the NHL At the Rink podcast. As always, it's brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Sean, by the way, the Edmonton Oilers helmets, their helmet decal, their advertisements on their helmets. Skip. We're aligned with the Edmonton Oilers, Sean. Me, you, and Connor McDavid.
Well, greatness. Greatness personified.
That's
right
it.
there. That's
it.
the trio of greatness. Forget Draisaitl and Bouchard and those guys. It's me, you, and McDavid.
What a first line. That is a terrific first line. And you can add to it Mike Zeisberger, who's our colleague at NHL.com. He's going to be our guest on this episode. Boy, did we talk a lot of Mitch Marner with Zeiss, and we'll play that interview for you shortly. But Sean, we're past the trade deadline. We're now into the playoff push, and there's some teams that are looking a little bit different. And I wanted to start in the Central Division. The biggest name, Mikko Rantanen, moves back into that division, now with the Dallas Stars. But the Colorado Avalanche, his former team, they've reimagined their center depth by getting Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle after reimagining their goaltending. And a little bit on the right side, too, with Marty Necas getting him for Mikko Rantanen. So they've done a lot of work this season. The Winnipeg Jets added Tanev, and they added Luke Schenn, Brandon Tanev and Luke Schenn. This division loaded up, Sean. This is monsters in this division now, as we expected. But Colorado in particular, Sean, 6 wins in a row as we speak, playing great hockey. The Winnipeg Jets, they've been great all year. They're only up 6 points on the Dallas Stars now. What a division this is.
It was an arms race, and it went right down to the wire, right? You went past 3 o'clock as these teams tried to position themselves and looked at each other and said, how do I beat that team? I thought Colorado did really well for itself. I think it's showing now, in the way they're playing. But I think they look to the South and they say, what the hell happened?
Yep.
We knew we had to get rid of Rantanen, or we thought we had to get rid of Rantanen, and we did. And we put him someplace where we wouldn't have to meet him until the Stanley Cup final, and then there's a 1 in 16 chance of that happening. Here he is, and he could be the difference in a first round matchup. He could be the difference in the Colorado Avalanche going out in the first round or making it to the Western Conference final or the Stanley Cup final. Like, that's how big of an acquisition it is, I think, for the Dallas Stars.
It is huge. He is a monster player, a huge playoff performer, and it's going to be fascinating if that matchup does happen with the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. But I'm going to flip this on you. I'm going to look at the Avalanche. Like I said, they reimagined their goaltending earlier this season. Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood in, Alexander Georgiev and Justus Annunen out. Goaltending has been much better, right? Next thing we knew on their list had to be center depth. Okay, their center depth was, it hasn't been the same since they won the Cup, and they had, and they had Nazem Kadri behind Nate McKinnon, right? Well, now you have Nathan McKinnon, obvious. Then you have Brock Nelson, who is slotted in the right way and can play the same type of game he was playing, and he's on a first power play unit now with McKinnon and Makar and Nichushkin. That's a great spot right there for Brock Nelson. And then you bring in Charlie Coyle, who is a real solid two-way center. And now he doesn't have to play in a top 6 as he was in Boston. He can play third-line center there. He can handle some tough matchups. He can kill penalties. He's a big guy. He's got playoff experience. You look around what the Colorado Avalanche have done, just the balance of this season and how they've reimagined themselves. I think it's just amazing work by their general manager, Chris McFarland. And And to be honest, Sean, I know how good Mikko Rantanen is and the Dallas Stars are, and I know how good the Winnipeg Jets have been this season. But I look at Colorado and I say, that's the team right now. In my mind, they're the team right now. It changes weekly, but right now, I look at them with the depth that they have and how they can slot their guys and the goaltending they're getting and the defense we know that they have. That's the team, man.
You're coming around.
I have fully come around. You know what I have, but it took brand new goaltending and brand new center depth for it to happen.
Yeah, and I'm there, and then I look at Dallas, and I'm like, well, when they get Heiskanen back, they still have the better goalie, and up front, I think they're somewhat equal. So it really comes down to the blue line, and Heiskanen's going to be a huge difference. Sadly, Winnipeg has had a fantastic year. To me, they're the clear three.
Isn't that amazing?
In all this. Just because, and for one reason and one reason only, they've done unbelievable this regular season. They're just coming off their second double-digit win streak of the year, but they've lost a few games since then. I don't trust Connor Hellebuyck. He's going to win. He is going to win the Vezina unanimously in our little poll that we're putting out this week. I'm not giving anything away by saying that. There's no competition for it whatsoever. He's the best goalie in the game right now.
Yeah, 100%.
He's got nothing on his resume that would suggest that he's going to be a difference maker in the playoffs.
Well, do you give any credibility to him performing the way he did at the Four Nations face-off? And it's a small sample size, but the pressure was large in a massively intense environment, and he performed really well. Does that push Hellebuyck, who has not played well in the playoffs in about 6 years, right? When the Jets went to the Western Conference Final several years ago, he was good then. But the last 2 years, he's won game one and then lost 4 in a row. That's how it's gone in the first round the last 2 years. And this is a very similar Jets team as it was last year. There isn't a lot of changes, right?
And it's a very
But do you give
Colorado
credibility
team.
to what he did in the Four Nations?
Not much. I liked what he did, but he wasn't a difference maker. Right? In that final, there was a clear-cut difference in the goaltenders.
There had to be. There had to be. The U.S. was better, and they put more pressure on Jordan Binnington. I'd argue that there had to be, that Hellebuyck did well, and just one shot beat him, and that won the game. But Binnington was terrific in that game, but he had to be, or else that game doesn't come close to overtime.
He was supposed to be better, and he wasn't.
Listen, I'm not going to debate you right now on the Jets being third in that division, which seems crazy since they're first in that division right now, and they have been all season, right? I mean, since the very start of the season they have, and they had won 15 of their first 16 games. I mean, they've been that way all year. I think I'm less concerned about Hellebuyck, and I'm just more concerned about their depth all around, being able to match what Dallas has and being able to match what Colorado has. And it's something we'll talk about with our guest, Mike Zeisberger, our colleague from Toronto-based NHL.com staff writer for us. You know, the importance of finishing first in the division, right? I mean, Winnipeg has got a 6-point lead right now on Dallas as we speak here on Tuesday. The importance of finishing first there is huge because you can get rolling a little bit. If you finish first there, right, maybe you get the top seed. You'll get a team in Vancouver or Calgary or St. Louis or Utah or whoever it is, and you got to feel good about your chances and get you rolling a little bit. Where if you finish second in that division, well, now you're playing, if you're Dallas, you're playing Colorado. If you're Colorado, you're playing Dallas, right? And now you don't have a chance to get your game rolling at all because it's right there. I mean, this is you may not face a better opponent in the playoffs than that one. So I actually think it's important, obviously, for the Jets to lock up that top seed, but I do think it is maybe it's a little bit of a recency bias too, Sean. We're coming off of the trade deadline, Rantanen, Nelson, Coyle. We're looking at these teams, the way Dallas has played recently, the way that Colorado's playing right now. Maybe it's a little bit of a recency bias that we're putting the Jets at 3 as well.
Well, I don't think so. I think they're the third most talented team out of those 3 teams, and they did nothing at the deadline on tinker.
They tinkered.
Right.
They added depth. They added bite.
Yeah. So, but I think even if you're a Winnipeg fan, right, and you look at those teams on paper, and you take goaltending out of it, right, skaters, they're the third best team.
All right. Listen. Like I said, I'm not going to debate you on it.
What, do you have friends in Winnipeg?
No.
I love Winnipeg. I love Winnipeg. It's my favorite place. It's where somehow I end up every year when they get in the playoffs. Oh, Sean would love to go to Winnipeg. And the answer is yes, Sean would love to go to Winnipeg, especially connecting through Minneapolis from Vegas. Sean would love that.
Sean would love that. Absolutely. That's Sean's route.
Sean will embrace that with open arms.
You
because
get
Winnipeg
segments, flight segments.
Winnipeg is a fantastic place, a fantastic hockey market. There's no place better to be in the spring than Winnipeg.
You were about to say Vancouver, which is, I think, better to be in the spring, but that's just a bias I'll put out there.
Yeah, no, I meant.
But you
Winnipeg.
might get both, Sean. You might get both.
You might get both. So, but with all of that said, objectively, when you look at their rosters, their roster is the third most talented.
Yeah. And Colorado's the most talented. I think they're the most talented,
especially with Nichushkin back.
Yes, with Nichushkin back, it's absolutely the goaltending is a drop. Ottinger to Blackwood, because we've seen what Jake Ottinger can do in these moments, right? But I don't think it's that significant of a drop. So I don't know that it makes up so much, but I've come around fully on the Avalanche. All right, before we get to Zeiss, let's flip it over to the East. Late on deadline, right around 3 o'clock, there comes the word. And by the way, I was waiting for the Vegas Golden Knights like everybody else is, and that didn't happen. Instead, it was the Florida Panthers, and they jump in, and they get Brad Marchand from the Boston Bruins. Now, he's not ready, to come back yet. He's still out with an upper body injury. But what a move. Can't believe, Sean, that Brad Marchand got traded by the Boston Bruins. I can't believe they couldn't come to terms on a new contract. It just blows my mind that this happened, okay? It's like I'm still blown away that the Tampa Bay Lightning couldn't come to an agreement with Steven Stamkos. It still boggles my mind that it couldn't happen, and this will too. It's weird. Brad Marchand won the press conference, right? I mean, he was absolutely terrific in that press conference that he had with the Florida media, talking about the red, how it brings out his eyes, Sam Bennett, and and all that. But when he comes back, and Matthew Tkachuk is able to play, they're going to throw a line out there of Marchand, Bennett, and Tkachuk. Sean, I would go right to the bench if I was the opponent. I would skate right to the bench, and I would tell my coach, nope, somebody else gets that one because I'm not touching those guys. I'm not going out there against those guys.
It's the Florida flu instead of the Broad Street Bully flu is what you're telling me?
Yeah. It's what a line that can be. Like, what? And that has to be the plan, right? Where Verhaeghe and Barkov and Reinhart in the top line and Marchand and Bennett and Tkachuk on the second line. It's got to be the plan once everybody's healthy.
Yeah, you would think. I mean, they can move it all around, and you know what? I'm not like you. I'm not shocked that Brad Marchand's not a Bruin anymore. I think it's become abundantly clear. You brought up Stamkos. There's been a few other examples of it. I think it's become abundantly clear that you can't keep putting the band back together. When you feel like your time is over, It's time to move on. And re-signing Brad Marchand where the Bruins are right now would just prolong what they are.
No, disagree. I
Yeah,
disagree.
okay.
I disagree. I think you re-sign Brad Marchand because he sets the culture. He sets the tone. And he can still and
What tone did he
is
set?
still an effective player. He's still
What
an
tone-
effective player.
What tone has he set with the Boston Bruins this year?
This has been a tough year. I'm talking big picture. This year,
What-
it's been tough.
what-
These years happen. This has been a tough one. And it started the start of the season where Jeremy Swayman was really struggling. The defense was struggling, right? I don't know that this is on Brad Marchand, what's happening here. But
I'm not saying it's on Brad Marchand, but if he's setting the tone and you're a team that's barely above water, threatening to drown, what's he done for you?
well, they were apparently they wanted to sign him. They just couldn't come to an agreement on a number, right?
Yeah.
So this
of
isn't
course, if you-
this isn't a situation where they didn't want him.
No. But what I'm saying is, it's also not a situation where Tampa didn't
Boston.
not want where Tampa didn't not want
Oh.
Stamkos. They wanted him at a number that made sense. The number that made sense was likely obscene to Steven Stamkos.
Right. Yes.
The number was likely not palatable to Brad Marchand. But that's the number that was going to work for the Bruins. I think that they see where their future is, and it doesn't involve Brad Marchand. Like, to me, there's lessons to be learned, right? And you look at the Kings from the old times, because that's what it is now, and you look at the Blackhawks from the old times. They hung on too long. They romanticized those players, and they said, these are our champions. These are the guys in the room that set the tone, that bring everybody into the battle. They are our men. They defend our honor. We will ride and die with them forever. And they rode and died with them right to the bottom of the standings.
Well, those teams did it with multiple players. I'm just talking about one here. So there's a difference. But listen, it's weird. Maybe that's the bottom line, is just weird. But it's weird. Like I said, it's weird to see Stamkos in a Predators jersey too. These things happen. But they are. Do you think that the Panthers right now are the clear favorite in the Atlantic and then maybe in the East, in the Eastern Conference?
I thought they were before that move. And I think they still are, even with the absence of Aaron Ekblad, who's going to miss the rest of the regular season and the first 2 games of the playoffs while under suspension from the league. That's a huge blow. The acquisition, I think, of Seth Jones offsets it a little bit. You mentioned Tkachuk's going to come back healthy, hopefully. And rested and ornery.
Yes. He'll be that.
Brad Marchand's going to have something to prove. Could you imagine if Florida somehow overtook Washington and finished first or finished second, and Boston somehow got their stuff together in the wake of Brad Marchand leaving and all the injuries and everything else and finished 8th or 7th, and those 2 teams met in the first round? It would be absolute chaos.
That would be chaos. That'd be fun. It would be a lot of fun. But, there's other teams that are going to have a say in that. One of them, of course, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And listen, there's a lot to discuss there. And we discussed a lot of it with our colleague Mike Zeisberger, who joins us now. And this interview is brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Here's Mike Zeisberger. Zeiss, my man, what's going on? How's life in Toronto?
Oh, well, if there can't be a controversy in the middle of winter during hockey season, I mean, it wouldn't be Toronto, would it?
No, that's Toronto, and you got one. So we want to dive into it, Zeiss. I mean, what's going on with Mitch Marner?
Well, I mean, like from the center of the hockey universe, which, I always laugh when I hear people say that. I say, yeah, Toronto is the center of the hockey universe when you go 5 miles east of here, or 5 hours east of here to get to Montreal. And then you'll get to the center of the hockey universe. But what it is, the center of the hockey universe is having things blown out of proportion. And part of that is people give a damn, they care. That's how much it means to people. But obviously, with this Mitch Marner thing, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent coming up in the summer. The Leafs have approached him. He has said that, I want to wait. I'd like to play here, but I want to wait, which is his prerogative, okay? Here's what people don't understand about this, and it drives me nuts sometimes. It was the team, and it's not Brad Treliving, who's the general manager now, but it was the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time with general manager Kyle Dubas, who gave him a no movement clause in his last contract. Okay? So when people therefore start because, as you guys have probably heard, I'm sure everybody in the hockey world has, last week, the Leafs approached Mitch Marner and said, hey, you know what? Would you ever waive your no trade or no movement to go to Carolina as a possible trade for Mikko Rantanen? Now, I've got to put this in a little bit of perspective, guys. From what I understand, the Leafs went to him and they said, look we don't want to trade you. We want you to be part of this team. Okay? But just in case, Carolina has come to us and said, look, if we were to do a trade or think about a trade, for Rantanen, this is who we wanted. He said no. So, fine. What's he do? Did it bother him? Well, last I saw, he went out the next day on Saturday and scored 2 goals. And then he went out last night and scored the winning goal in a shootout. So, it is his right to wait to go into free agency. Doesn't mean that he won't sign with Toronto again. But there, this kid has been a polarizing figure in Toronto for some reason for a while. I don't agree with it. I think that he is one of the top 10 best players in the league, if not higher than that. But to criticize him for stuff like that, the team gave him the new no movement clause, Dan. Okay?
Yep.
You give him something like that, he has every right to go out to the market, even if he wants to come back to Toronto and see what his worth is on the open market.
So, Zeiss, first I want to congratulate you on moving our podcast from PG rated to R rated.
What'd I say?
Oh, I can't repeat it. That would make it X rated. Swearing all over the place. But
well, you know what? That's why you have a brilliant, brilliant producer who knows the beep button.
Yes, it's like Howard Stern here. Hey, so you say all that, but if I'm Mitch Marner, I'm saying you like Mikko Rantanen more than me.
Maybe. I mean, look it. You have to be in that room to have known how it was presented. From what I was told, it was like, look it, let's re-sign. We'd like to re-sign you right now. But as a general manager, you have to do your due diligence. Now, the Marner camp, you have to understand a couple things too. His agent, Darren Ferris, has a reputation of taking guys to the open market when they have a chance to. So, you know what? I've kind of thought all along that's the direction they're going. I also know that the Marner camp has been upset by some of the criticism that Mitch has got over the years. And look, Mitch hasn't produced in the playoffs. None of them have. You've had one playoff series win in their careers going back to 2016. One series. That's legit. But this kid has got a lot more than Austin Matthews has. He's gotten a lot more than Morgan Riley has. He's got more than William Nylander has. Interestingly, though, since 2016, he has more points than any of those other three guys in the playoffs. Does that get him away from criticism? No. But for some reason, he's been a polarizing figure. He's a local kid. And I know the Marner camp, I know his family, that's kind of bothered them a little bit. So, maybe this will too. He keeps saying he wants to be a Leaf, but you know what? The bottom line is, Sean, he holds all the cards. Those cards were given him by the Leafs. 2 years ago, they had a chance to trade him before his no movement came in. They chose not to. And now we just got to see the way that it goes. But I'll tell you one thing. If this kid walks, and you've got a lot of fans around that are saying, okay, if he doesn't want to be here, who are you going to replace him with? Playoff success or no playoff success, who are you going to replace him with? Because Rantanen's not going to be a free agent now in the summer. How often do you get a 28-year-old guy that's going to finish in the top 10 in scoring that will be available to the highest bidder on the open market? You can count on one hand the last few years.
The only guy you would have been able to replace him with is Rantanen, and he's no longer available. So look, I'm gonna say something, and then I'm gonna ask you a question. One, I think Zize, a couple of months back, we had you on. We were talking about Mitch Marner, free agency, what he was going to do, and I think we talked about the idea of he should play this thing. He should do this. He should play this season out.
Yeah.
Do the very best he can for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He doesn't owe the Toronto Maple Leafs anything beyond what he is contractually obligated to give them, which is his absolute very best until the contract is over. And he is giving that to them. And then we'll see where it goes. And if the criticism continues the way it does on Mitch Marner and whatnot, fair or unfair, fans have a right to do that. I don't care. It's okay. Media has a right to do that. That's fine. But he can do what he wants after this. Play it out. Do it the very best. And if he wants to remain Toronto Maple Leaf, he can do it. I admire him for the way he is going about this. I really do. I think he's going about it the best possible way for Mitch Marner. But let me ask you this. Does this come down to a similar situation, not the Steven Stamkos situation, not the last one with the Lightning where he left, but the previous one where he signed sort of just before that free agency option opened for him? Do you see Marner returning to the Maple Leafs, or is it dependent on what happens in the playoffs?
Well, I don't think it's dependent on what happens in the playoffs. And a lot of people think that it should be. But again, if there's a shortcoming in the playoffs, again, is that his fault? Is it, to me, it's a team thing. It's going to be shared with their big guys. Again, Dan, it comes to, in my mind, who do you replace him with? Because look at the way that the cap is going up in the next 2 years. And I will say this, Brad Treliving has done a good job of rebuilding the Toronto defense. I'm not putting it up there with the mid-70s Montreal Canadian blue lines or anything. But when you look, I thought, I got to admit, guys, I was really surprised that Brad Treliving was able to get Brandon Carlo out of Boston. This is a guy that I've liked for a long time. I think that's the type of guy you need in the playoffs. And you think that, he brought in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Obviously, Tanev is the big guy there. And all of a sudden you look, and then you put him with Morgan Riley and Jake McCabe, and even, Benoit is your number 6 guy. They have 7 defensemen under contract for next year and beyond, at pretty reasonable prices. So you're going to have cap room. Even if they re-sign John Tavares, his contract is going to go down from $11 million, which it is now, to, I got to think, at least half of that. So you're going to have the cap room. And even if you give Marner that money, you're still going to have money to fill in there. So I do think that there's a good chance that he does resign. But again, and it's funny you brought up the Stamkos thing. I can remember and we've talked about this before. Everybody thought, oh, he's going to come to Toronto. His dad was best friends with Joe Bowen, the Leafs play-by-play guy. Uh, I can remember calling him in his last year in Sarnia, doing a story with him. He goes, "I look at the standings every day to see where the Leafs are." Well, they brought him in. He met with the mayor and the president of Canadian Tire, who said, "You'll be our spokesperson coast to coast." And I remember him telling me after the fact, he goes, "I don't really know if I wanted that much pressure when the mayor of your hometown is there going, and the president of one of the biggest companies saying, 'Come here,' and well." But the other thing he said at the time was the Leafs weren't very good. They hadn't even drafted Austin Matthews yet at the time. So, that played into it. I think Mitch understands where this team is going. I think that he knows that the window is open. But I also think, and the one thing that I'm not sure if you can say goes against him, but you don't sign by July 1st. That 8th year comes off. So the longest you can get, as far as I understand, is 7 years. But
Yeah.
you know what? Maybe he's willing to take that risk just to say, you know what? Some team offered me this finite amount of money. Are you going to match it? And the other thing, guys, just quickly, I've seen a lot of stuff out there about, oh, well, they can offer him the same as Rantanen. That's not the same, because there's no income tax in Texas. Okay. So that narrative has to stop with people thinking that is the same amount of money just because it's the same number on a piece of paper.
So you've said all this, Zeiss. Why
Yep.
does he come? Why does he come back?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Because he looks in the dressing room and he has Austin Matthews in there. He has William Nylander in there. I understand that they haven't had playoff success, but are you going to go somewhere else and have a better shot? Free agency will determine that. And you know what? He's from here. This is where he wanted to play his entire life. And he knows if he wins a cup here, well, we all know what that would be like. He'd practically be hockey immortality. And look at this kid is already 5th all time in scoring for the franchise. He's only 27 years old. Those things matter. What I think works against him coming back, and I said this before, is that there are people in his camp that were very, very hurt by whether it be his family or that what they think is undue criticism. And it just depends on, is he going to do what he wants to do, or how much will he listen to the people around him?
All right. Well, that was a solid 14 minutes on Mitch Marner.
Is that all? That's about
we could,
23 hours less than we're getting up here, Dan.
I'm sure it is. We could keep going. I know we could, but I wanted to switch.
That's fine.
I wanted to switch topics on you because there's another pressing question, and it's sort of tangentially related to this. Is the Carolina Hurricanes had they acquired Mikko Rantanen. They could not re-sign him. They then traded Mikko Rantanen to Dallas, who does re-sign him in Dallas. We all know those things. Rod Brind'Amour goes on local radio in Raleigh and basically says that Rantanen said there's 4 teams I'm going to go to, and you're not one of them, the Carolina Hurricanes. So, Zeiss, do the Carolina Hurricanes, who you admire, I admire, Rod Brind'Amour has been a terrific coach in this league. They've been a successful franchise, a successful team. Do they have a problem? Do they have an issue in attracting guys like that to stay and want to play there? And Mitch Marner is maybe the latest example. If the Leafs asked him to waive his no move to go to Carolina, he said no, is part of the reason he didn't want to play in Carolina.
In his case, I'm not sure that's
right. He's probably off on that one. Yeah.
But, Dan, when I heard that, what Brind'Amour said, and that is so Rod the Bod, is it not? Like, just go out and say what's on your mind.
Yeah.
But to me, where the mistake was is if you're trading for Mikko Rantanen, okay, and and I mean when he was with Colorado, and you're going and you're giving up a kid like Marty Necas, who, you know what? I mean, I've got to admit, watching him now and watching him in Colorado, I knew he was good. I didn't know he was this good. And I don't think that kid has even come close to reaching how high his ceiling can go. How do you not know? If he said there's only 4 teams he wanted to go to and Carolina wasn't one of them, how do you not do your due diligence before you trade away a guy like Marty Necas? I know I'm saying his name wrong, but we know who you're talking. You know who I'm talking about.
Necas.
See, I knew. See, thank you, Dan. You saved me.
If
again.
only it was a swear word, you would have got it.
Yeah.
Don't
Got
turn it
a few more of
X-rated,
those
Sean.
too, but hey, I'm sure there's Canes fans that are using those words right now, but I just don't understand how you can make that initial trade and give up somebody like that without first knowing if this guy even wanted to resign. Because from what Brindamore said yesterday, it was never an option. So I don't necessarily think guys don't want to play there. I think there are some guys that would like it. You're out of the limelight. It's a good place to raise a family. But I think it's management's priority or job to do its due diligence to make sure that, you know what, this could have happened. I just think that's a big whiff by the Carolina in making that trade in the first place.
There, unless I'm completely wrong, there's no way to know that until you make the trade. It's tampering. If you don't have permission from Colorado to ask, you don't know.
Well,
right? How do you make that trade? How do you do that without tampering? And look, if I'm running a team and I believe in my team, I'm going to show my team to somebody and I'm going to say, you come and you join me and you see what happens. And if they don't want to, you make the best out of it. But there's no way they could have known what Mikko wanted without breaking the rules.
Well, they knew there was a risk. And
they swung big, just like they did with Gensel. And I thought the most interesting thing Rod said was that, Jake would have stayed if we made the offer. We didn't make the offer. That's on us. You look at that team and everybody that's left, they've left for a better offer. It hasn't been out of dissatisfaction. And then you look at all the guys that have stayed. Jacob Slavin stayed there his whole career. He's had a chance to leave. Brent Burns chose to go there. He didn't have to go there. Like I don't see a problem, and I don't have an issue with what Eric did. He couldn't know what was in Mikko's mind because he wasn't allowed to ask.
Hey, you got to know the risk, number one. And number two, look at the return that they've got. How do you tell a guy like Brent Burns? How do you tell a guy like Jordan Staal, who are both in their mid-30s? They've got I don't know how many years they got left. Okay, so when all is said and done, and I'm not bringing Taylor Hall into the mix, but Stankoven, okay, 3 or 4 years down the road, this kid could be a star, and you got all these first-round picks. Their window was right now. Okay, if that's the big, you just gave up in a year where you got a chance to win a Stanley Cup, you pretty much gave away. How do we say that, Dan? Necas. Yeah, I'll get this right sooner or later. How do you give away Necas and you come away with Stankoven in terms of what helps you right now? And how do you tell your aging guys, okay, well, you know what? In 3 or 4 years, when Stankoven's good and we use these picks, we'll be good down the road. How does that help their window now?
You know how it helps, and not to cut you off, Dan, but you know how it helps? You walk into that room and you say, this guy didn't want to be with us. That's on him. That's not on anybody else. That's on him. And let's go show everybody who we are and what we are. That's how you do it. They tried to make themselves better. The player chose not to play along, which is his God-given right or his CBA-given right, whatever right it is. He had a right not to do that. But that's not on management.
Getting a
If
better
if
return that helps you now is on management, and
if,
I truly believe that.
if I'm a player on that team right now, I'm pissed. And I'm not pissed at management. They tried. They went for it. The player had no interest in it. For
Here's my
why?
take on this. Well,
John,
here's
they
where I'm
tried.
at with this.
John, they tried last year, and Brendan Moore just said they didn't give Gensel enough money. Whose fault is that?
So I don't mind them taking the swinging for the fences with Rantanen. I don't mind it at all. And I remember in talking, they were at Madison Square Garden shortly after that trade, and I was talking with Eric Tulsky about it, and basically the conversation was we're going to show him who we are, and we're going to try to convince him that this is the right place by who we are and what we do. Okay, it didn't work, and you know what? There was a fractured time. You had the long break for the Four Nations. The timing wasn't right. The timing just wasn't right.
Like 1 or 2 home games?
Yeah, it just wasn't the right timing, okay, for it to have the ability to show him what it's all about there. So, and then they get nervous that he's not going to resign, basically, and so they move him. Where I'm at with this is, I like Logan Stankoven as a player. I got no issue with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you do it as a general manager, but I will say this. They acquired first-round picks in that trade. They don't need those first-round picks right now. Mm-hmm. And maybe Dallas held them up with the negotiation for Rantanen and all that. You got to be able to multitask there and find a way to get those first-round picks in a trade out so you get better right now. Yeah. That to me is where I'm at with this whole thing, is the Hurricanes are still a very good team. Mikko, Necas, they're out. Stankoven's in. But they could have done better using those first-round picks that they got in that trade. Now, Eric Tulsky came out and said, you listen, the negotiation with Dallas went longer than we thought, and we ran out of time. You got to be able to multitask that. This is why I'm not a general manager, why you're not a general manager's eyes, Sean, the same way, because we don't, this very well could have happened, and that's how it played out. Okay. But they weren't able to use those picks, so they were not able to improve themselves immediately right now. And in what capacity and who they got and all that stuff, I'm not 100% sure, but they weren't able to do it right away. So they go with what they got, and if they do it right, they'll have a lot of money to spend in the offseason and first-round picks to use to get even better in trades. So this is still a pretty good team, but the real test now will come this summer, how they use those first-round picks and what did they use the money for that they would have given Mikko Rantanen.
Yeah, I just think that there's a window this year. And when I look at it, are the Carolina Hurricanes a better team now than they were 6 weeks ago? And and I'm talking pre-deadline, okay? Because a lot of teams, I loved what Florida did. I loved, obviously, what Dallas did. But, 6 weeks ago, guys, I know the last podcast that I was on with you guys, we talked about how wide open everything is. There is a window here this year. Okay? And again, guys like a Stahl and a Burns, how do you tell them, like, well, you know what? I mean, we tried, but, and, whether it's fair or not, management's job is to make yourselves better and take advantage when those windows are open. And I really thought that the windows were open this year for the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm not saying, hey, they could go on and win the cup, but I think the odds are a little longer than they were 6 weeks ago.
Agree. All right. We'll see. One more for you, Zeiss. And I want Sean.
I promise
Sean,
I won't swear again.
Sean and I, Sean, we'll talk about this a little bit too. The Central Division and the Atlantic Division. Place a value on finishing first. What division is more important to finish first place in?
Ooh. You know what? I'm going to say the Central. And that's tough to do because to me, sooner or later, you're gonna in the Atlantic, you're gonna have to go through Florida. They're still my pick to win that division. Toronto, Tampa, well, I think they're good teams. I just think they're a little below Florida right now. I love the Jones pickup is and especially with what the suspension to Ekblad. But I love the makeup of that team. I think Tkachuk's going to come back as hungry as ever. We know Marchand. But man, Colorado and Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, you could if you didn't know what the matchups were, and we just threw out to a lot of our colleagues or people in the know, just going by rosters, who would your Stanley Cup favorites be? I think that they would be your top two, or if not, they'd be your top 3 or 4. And we're not even counting Winnipeg, that's tied for the best record in the division. So in the Central Division, or in the National Hockey League with Washington. So I really do think the Central, and it's fascinating to me because and this is me stick handling into another direction. We talk all about all these teams, guys, and we talk about McDavid too. Kelly McCrimmon is sitting in Vegas. We're talking about the Central Division. We're talking about the Atlantic Division. Nobody's talking about Vegas. And I think they love it. Let the other bullies beat each other up. We know the way that Vegas works.
Well, actually, the way that Vegas works is to make a move at every deadline, and they didn't.
They made their moves last year by getting guys with term, by getting Thomas Hertl, by getting Hanifin. And you know what? I mean, they played Dallas in the first round last year. That was kind of like Dallas, Colorado, if it ends up like that this year. But that is a team, and, having talked to Kelly McCrimmon before the deadline, he said, when we made those 2 acquisitions, we looked beyond this year. And those guys have been very, very good at, especially down the stretch here lately, at contributing to that team. So I'm fascinated because, to me, when I look at forget the Atlantic Division, when I look at the Eastern Conference, with the unfortunate injury to Jack Hughes, Carolina not being as good, I see Florida being the easily, I shouldn't say easily, but a step above every other team in the Eastern Conference. And, I know Dan has talked about this a little bit too. People shouldn't sleep on the Rangers because all of a sudden the door is opened a little bit and some of these teams have come back to the pack. So, I think the Western Conference is going to be the wild, wild West. And I think the East is Florida saying they're going, knock us off our perch. We dare you.
Well, you're right. You're probably right about that. Let's see who finishes first in that division. But I think it's just huge to finish first in both of those divisions because you want to avoid that 2-3 matchup. Zais, this was fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us, all right?
Thank you both for having me. And I am now going to the bathroom and washing my mouth out with soap.
Make sure it's Canadian soap size.
Okay, I will, guys. Thank you for having me on.
Great stuff there from Zais. That interview was brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Sean, you were right, by the way, saying Vegas is typically the team, that jumps in there. And did you notice that right before the deadline, the Golden Knights on their good old X account, the old Twitter, just tweeted, "Hi."
I did notice. And I know I'm an old man, and I might scream at clouds. I'm not a big fan.
No?
Of the socials.
Oh, I loved it. I thought it was great. I did. I don't love it when they put lines out there that are like emojis. Like each guy's got his own emoji. They do that too. But that little hi, that was great. I like that. They didn't do anything though. So it got me like all thinking like, oh, what do they got cooking? They're going to get Marchand. No, he went to the Florida Panthers. instead. All right, I want to play off of what we were talking about with Zeiss, finishing first in the Central and the Atlantic. You got an answer. Which is more important in your mind to finish first? We just touched on a lot of stuff with the Central Division before our interview with Zeiss, and we've talked about the Panthers, and we know that. But, like, where are you at with this? To finish first in one of those two divisions, do you put more value on one or the over the other?
No, I don't think so. I think, if you want to win the cup, not to sound like a broken record, you got to beat all comers. And yeah, maybe a draw can make it easier. But in the end, if you're the best team, you're going to prove it.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I will say this, though. I think it's paramount you finish first in the Central Division because Dallas and Colorado, we just talked about it. We talked about it before our interview with Zeiss. Like, they're 1-2 in our minds in that division, and they could play each other in the first round. Whereas if I am in the Atlantic Division and I don't finish first, but neither does Toronto, I'm okay. I'm okay playing Toronto in the first round. And to be honest with you, I like Tampa. I like what they've done, the way they've come back this season, and they've played really well to get themselves back into this first round, to first place race. They add Yanni Gourde and Oliver Bjorkstrand. I actually love the philosophy Julien Brisebois has that I'm trying to collect cup wins and I'm not trying to collect first round picks. I like that too, but I'd be okay playing them as well in the first round, as opposed to being okay playing Dallas or Colorado or, frankly, Winnipeg in the first round. So I think it's more important putting a value on it to finish first in the Central than it is in the Atlantic.
You know the one team I don't want to play in the first round of the playoffs?
Who's that?
Tampa Bay Lightning. You know why?
Vasilevsky?
Exactly.
Yeah. Listen, you're right. You're right. But, listen, he's been great this season. But what about Hellebuck? You were just talking about that before we talked to Zeiss, right?
Yeah, go look at the 2 rings.
I get it. I understand. I knew what I was walking into when I said that, okay? But those two have probably been the best 2 goalies in the league this season. And Hellebuck's been better.
Yeah, and one's won 2 cups. And the other one hasn't won 2 rounds.
Yeah. Well, he has won 2 rounds. He just hasn't won them in a very long time. So, all right, listen. I think it's a good, fun little debate there. Quickly, though, what I said about Tampa, I'm curious your thought on that. Like, I love Julien Brisebois' philosophy as he approaches this. It is going to kill the Tampa Bay Lightning one day. It will. But the Tampa Bay Lightning might have 3 or 4 banners hanging before it does. And then you're kind of okay with it after that, aren't you?
Yeah, and I don't understand the it's going to kill them argument, right? Because generally the salary cap's going up, right? So you have more money to spend, and then B, they tend to outspend the cap no matter what, and then they get to this reckoning every summer where they have to move players because they can't afford them with the way that they operate. And then it's your job as a GM to recoup those assets as you move guys along to get out of cap hell. So I don't know that I see a reckoning coming.
You know what? You're probably right with that. I say that with still that when I said that and you countered me, I said it with still like that flat cap in my head, you know? Because we're so accustomed to it. We're so used to it now. But you're right. The cap's going up. It's going to go up significantly. And a team like Tampa Bay is going to continue to spend to win. They're going to spend to win, right? And I will say this, though. I don't think it'd be a lot of fun being an amateur scout for the Tampa Bay Lightning. You do all this work and you get like 2 picks. They trade every pick. I'd be like, trade me to a team that's got like 13 so I could do my job.
Yeah, no. Look, I think Brisebois has no fear. And he has no loyalty other than to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
He operates the right way.
Other than to the bottom line. You know, we just talked about the Blackhawks and the Kings of yore, and kind of where their downfall was because of the loyalty to the core, right? And Brisebois already shown there's no move that Brisebois can make that'll be as polarizing as the Stamkos move. It's kind of like when the new general comes in and he lays down the law by like doing something crazy. And then you're like, okay, well, it can't get any worse than that. So, but you've been warned, and nobody's immune, and you go make an example out of the best soldier and whatever it is. There's nothing that Julien Brisebois can do that would be more shocking than what happened with Stamkos.
Yeah.
He's already proven he has no fear, and that he's going to swing big, and that he would rather feel bad for trying to hit a home run and missing than try and hit singles and winning a round of the playoffs every year. Like, they are the definition of go big or go home.
Yeah, and it's what you want. If you're a fan of that team, you love it, right? You gotta love it if you're a fan of that team. And the other thing, it takes me back to a conversation. I've brought this up a few times. It was a real telling conversation that Nick Kotsanika, our colleague, and I had with George McPhee, president of the Vegas Golden Knights, when he said, I don't like, this was a year and a half ago at a Board of Governors meeting, and we were talking with George, and he said, I don't like that in our league, teams feel they have to break it down to the studs to try to be good again. You don't need to do that. You have to operate your team in a way where you can retool or reset if you need to, but you continue pushing it forward rather than go completely backwards. I mean, look, Chicago Blackhawks went completely backwards. They're nowhere close to being a contender. The San Jose Sharks went completely backwards. They're picking up pieces here and there, but they're still really, really far away. The Anaheim Ducks are finally inching a little bit closer, but that just might be a team playing with no pressure right now. That's finding its game. But Washington is an example. Tampa is an example of teams that they redo things on the fly, but it's all in the element of pushing forward. And those are the teams that continue to succeed and they continue to contend, and the other ones are going to, be out of it for a long time.
Well, the Rangers tore it down.
It's a different scenario because the Rangers tore it down, and then Artemi Panarin said he wanted to go there. Adam Fox said he wanted to go there. They were able to trade for Jacob Trouba, and they had already drafted Igor Shesterkin. It's a pretty, impactful way. They didn't tear it down by trading Mika Zibanejad and Chris Kreider too, right? I mean, they still had some pieces there. They did, and then they got guys that just wanted to go there, and big assets that wanted to go there, and
they still got the first and second round picks back to back.
They did, and they traded one of them, and the other one's not really having that great of a season right now, So it's not those guys who have been driving them. It's Panarin's, Fox, Zibanejad, Shesterkin, right? It's not Lafreniere, and they traded Kakko, so it's not about the draft.
No, it's not about the draft, and they did draft one of them and trade him, and they got assets for that. But it certainly helped. It made it a little bit more palatable, and it accelerated what they did. I think anybody would live through that kind of rebuild, right? You remember when they sent out the letter.
I remember the letter.
Well, I would hope you did. And they laid it all out for everybody in a bid for transparency, and there was much teeth gnashing at the moment. How could New York do that? This is not a market that lives for rebuilds, that accepts rebuilds. And then there you are sitting in the Eastern Conference Final last year, and nobody remembered.
Yeah. Well, 2 out of 3 years in the Eastern Conference Final. Yeah.
Yeah, that 4 years ago, it was time to tear it all down. Like, I think you need to have a vision, and whatever that vision is, you have to commit to it And I don't know if the vision of going completely young is the right one, right? Like you look at Buffalo, you look at Ottawa, all those teams that were lost in the wilderness for so long and had their players just be whipped upon.
Yep.
Right? It sets a mindset where it's almost defeatist before it starts. We don't have the guns to play with these guys, so we're gonna lose, and that's okay because management told me it's okay. And when do you flip that switch? Like you've done it for so long, and then you get to a point, like kind of where Ottawa is now. You know, when do you get to a point where, as a player, you say it's not okay to lose anymore? It's been okay for so long. Now, but now it's not. Like, and a lot of that, I think, especially when you look at a team like Ottawa, it's internal, right? I was going to say Detroit too, but Detroit's right back where they are every year at this point. They got into the playoff picture, and now they can't win a game. I don't know that that's the way. Like,
Listen, Ottawa is pushing forward. They've decided. I think they've decided, at least it looks like they've decided, right, Sean, that it's not okay to lose anymore. Buffalo is a different scenario. I think your point on, that they put their young guys through it and then it becomes the culture. That Buffalo's still in that right now and can't seem to find their way out of it. But listen, Buffalo's a story for another day. Ottawa could be a story for next week. We'll see where they're at. Detroit, same way, but the story for right now and continues right now is the best story going in sports, at least the best individual story. So before we get out of here, we do have to touch on Alex Ovechkin. 9 goals away. He's reached single digits. Sean, do you care to amend your statement of him not getting it done this year, or are you just going to – that's the hill you're going to die on?
I'm not going to amend it. That's what I believe, and that's what I want. That's what
you
I
don't
want
want
for
him
Alex.
to get it, the record, this year?
No. Yeah,
Why?
no, because I want him to have the stage all to himself.
Believe me, if he gets the record on April 6th at UBS Arena, he'll have the stage all to himself. If he gets the record on April 15th at UBS Arena, he'll have the stage all to himself. I thought about those 2 dates because those are the 2 games I'm going to try to get to, by the way.
Yeah, for how long?
Enough. He has it for enough time.
Well,
And the Washington Capitals are a team that are going to finish first in their division, and they will be able to celebrate. So if he were to get the record before the end of the regular season, okay? Let's just look at it before the end of the regular season. Let's say he's able to get the record. We'll put it April 12th, okay? Which I think is a reasonable time. They can celebrate him April 13th at home in Washington. If he were to able to get the record of the last 2 games of the regular season, they're both on the road, so he doesn't get the grand celebration in Washington. I understand that. But he gets a grand celebration. All eyes are on this right now. The Caps are out west. Tom Galiti wrote a great story on this. I think it was John Carlson said it's like a movie. I mean, they're in Hollywood, right? I mean, this is great stuff, and I hope he gets it. I hope he can be celebrated this season, and it carries right into the playoffs because, Sean, that will be great theater just before the playoffs, and it'll get us even more pumped up for the playoffs, I think.
I think they're 2 distinct things.
They are 2 distinct things, but the attention it'll get will carry into the playoffs.
Why? It's over.
Because people are going to be interested, and they're going to be watching, and they're going to be like, oh, this is fun. Let's keep going. But I think people are going to be watching anyway. I think they're 2 distinct things. I don't think it makes a difference. You're right. But I hope he gets it this season just, because I want to see history. And I don't want to have to wait 3-4 months for it. Or longer.
That's the problem with kids today.
I don't want to wait.
They can't wait. They can't wait for anything. They have no patience. Their attention span.
47-year-old kid.
You're a kid. Look, I want him to break the record. It's not like I have this thing where, oh my God, I hope Ovi doesn't break the record. It should be Wayne's record. It's not that at all. It's the exact opposite. It is such a monumentous event that it should be clear of everything else. And my fear is in the last week of April, it will not be clear of everything else because there's markets all over this country, all over North America are going to be like, are we getting in the playoffs or not?
Fine.
And
break it
that's
before
their
that.
that's their whole focus.
So break it before that. Break it April 10th at home against the Carolina Hurricanes. Do that. Why not just do that?
Okay.
I'm just pumping goals in for him. But 9 away,
Yeah.
it's just a remarkable it's just so remarkable that he's this close. And that just, you know what? And Tom wrote a great story about how it's a really big thing with the Capitals, and it's pushing them, and they need to be pushed right now because they're not being pushed by Carolina. They're not being pushed by New Jersey. They're kind of in a bit of a lull. Washington, they're finding ways to win a couple of games, but they're not a desperate team. They're not they're not playing desperate teams right now either, and they're going to have to find a way to bring that motivation up. And I think this is a big thing. They've got this historic chase. The attention's going to be on them. I think 5 of their last 6 games are on national TV. That should motivate you. That should push you, and with an understanding of this chase is going on at the same time as we've got to prepare ourselves for what we hope is a long playoff run.
And it may well. And look, if he breaks it this year, great. That's awesome.
You don't want him to break it this year. You don't want him to
It's
break it at
great
all.
for-
We know it.
It's great for everybody.
You hope he doesn't break it.
Think how great it would be in October of next year. On
Yeah,
a
it would be
clean
great.
slate.
Fine. I want it now.
So, what are you, Veruca Salt?
That was a good reference. I like that.
Thank you.
I think
Thank you.
that's a good one to go out on. It is
Well,
a movie.
You know what? You talk about how remarkable it is. It's not any more remarkable, Dan, than the fact that we finished this podcast.
No, that's true. We've been
If the
interrupted.
listeners only knew the hardships
Yeah.
that happened to get this podcast done. Technical glitches, fire alarms, loss of power. Yet, we soldiered on, and what a podcast we delivered.
I agree. And I don't think we need to go any further on it for fear of another glitch. So, let's end it right here. As always, the NHL At the Rink podcast is brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. The Edmonton Oilers wear it on their helmets. We promote it here. Enjoy the hockey.